Dear friends, today we are going to tell you a story about a virtuous Hafiz Quran girl that will leave you astonished. When that Hafiz Quran girl passed away, people went to the cemetery to dig her grave and started digging. However, a shameful and terrifying incident occurred from the grave of that Hafiz Quran girl, which left people shocked and worried. What sin did that Hafiz Quran girl commit that such a terrible and shameful punishment was inflicted upon her? She was a Hafiz Quran and a virtuous girl. So why did such a punishment befall her? To know the complete story, stay with us until the end. Only then will you understand the whole story. So let's listen to this instructive incident today. After performing the Far prayer, Abdul Karim started heading towards the cemetery early in the morning because Abdul Karim was a gravedigger. In Urdu, a gravedigger is called a gorak. Abdul Karim used to dig the graves of all the people who passed away in that area. As usual, Abdul Karim had received the news that a young girl had passed away in the neighborhood. Abdul Karim took his equipment and left the house to dig the grave. When Abdul Karim reached the cemetery and went to the designated place to dig the grave, he had been informed the previous night that a Hafiz Quran girl had passed away. Therefore, the family of the deceased had requested that the grave be dug quickly to avoid any delay in the burial. The gravedigger, Abdul Karim, was between 40 to 45 years old. When he heard the news of the young girl's death, he recited Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un and said, "O my Lord, I am sure that she was a very virtuous servant of yours. I am fortunate to dig the grave of a virtuous Hafiz, Quran girl with my own hands. Please forgive my sins in return for this good deed, which I have committed knowingly or unknowingly." Abdul Karim started his work, i.e., began digging the grave. But what seemed strange to him was the restlessness in his heart. Previously, whenever he went to dig a grave, he never felt like this. Abdul Karim's steps had become heavy, and he thought that he had dug hundreds of graves in this cemetery before, but the ground seemed harder this time, that he struck the ground several times with his tools, but only stones came out. Abdul Karim thought that maybe this ground was rocky, so he decided to dig the grave in another place. But as soon as he started digging from the other side, he saw a scene that made him sweat profusely. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve and thought, "Oh my God, what is this? I don't understand anything. I have dug hundreds of graves in this cemetery before, but I have never seen such a scene." Abdul Karim became anxious, and his heartbeat felt faster due to the anxiety. But he took deep breaths and sat down in one place, wiping his sweat. While doing all this, a lot of time had passed for Abdul Karim. Meanwhile, the funeral of that Hafiz Quran girl entered the cemetery. That was perhaps the first funeral in history where more children aged 5 to 11 participated than men. All their eyes were red from crying, and the Kalima Shahadat was being recited loudly on their lips. They kept saying while crying, "May Allah make your journey easy." When a girl passed away, all the children of the neighborhood were carrying the funeral towards the cemetery. It seemed as if a very close relative of these children had departed from them. When people asked, it was revealed that the girl was a Hafiz Quran and used to teach the Quran to all the children. Out of love for their teacher, all these children participated in the funeral. The deceased had entered the cemetery for burial. While the gravedigger Abdul Karim was watching the large number of participants in the funeral with astonishment and fear that he had never seen such a large number of children participating in a funeral before. The children were crying as if their real mother had passed away. The Kalima Shahadat was being recited loudly. When Abdul Karim looked at the grave, he started feeling very anxious and worried. The way the funeral was being brought, it seemed that this girl was very virtuous and pure and had never committed any sin. That is why so many people participated in her funeral, even though she was a girl. But the conditions inside the grave had frightened Abdul Karim, and astaghfirullah was on his lips. When the girl's body was being lowered into the grave, the soil suddenly started moving. It felt as if something was present in the soil. The people present saw this scene, and their faces turned pale. Before they could bury the girl in the grave, a large black two-headed snake emerged from the ground and started biting the body. But the next moment, the people present screamed in fear and pulled the body out of the grave. The snake was roaming inside the grave. Seeing the snake and scorpions coming out of the grave, the people present screamed, and the news spread among the surrounding people. Many people said, "Look, a snake came out of the grave." Astaghfirullah. But this girl was a Hafiz Quran. How could a snake come out of her grave? This girl used to teach the Quran to many children and give religious lessons. But when they dug another grave, they saw the same terrifying scene. There were also many snakes and scorpions present in large numbers. When this scene was seen by two men present there, whose children used to go to this Hafiz Quran girl for religious education, they all went to a great religious scholar for help. The religious scholar was resting in his khanka, i.e., his room. This was not their usual time for rest, but often feeling heavy-hearted, they would take a little time to rest. They were very pious and devoted to Allah, and were a great religious scholar that in their village, any kind of difficulty or incident that occurred, or any kind of trouble, all the villagers would come to them. They spent their entire nights in worshiping Allah and their entire days fasting. Their piety was famous throughout the village that the two men quickly ran into the mosque. When they saw two men entering the mosque, they immediately stood up and sat down. Seeing them so worried, they themselves became concerned and asked what the matter was. They told Maulana Sahib everything they had seen with their own eyes. After hearing it, Maulana Sahib's eyes widened with astonishment. The elderly man said, "Astaghfirullah. Let me tell you that the elderly man used to live in the forests. That is why the news of the girl's death had not reached him. People thought he had gone to the forest to worship Allah." Then the elderly man said, "Take me to the cemetery too." He told the two men that until he saw the scene with his own eyes, he would not believe it. As soon as they reached the cemetery, there was a large crowd of people. But seeing the arrival of the pious man, people quickly made way. Maulana Sahib himself had arrived there, and in his heart, he was reciting Darud Pak. He thought, "May Allah make it well. What is this matter?" Maulana Sahib glanced at the girl's body and then at the people standing there. Children were standing on one side, and no one was going near the body. When Maulana Sahib peeked into the grave, his body trembled, but a man stepped forward and greeted Maulana Sahib and said, "My life is devoted to you. I want to say something." In the grave, there was a huge black snake, and the walls of the grave seemed to be moving as if scorpions were crawling in the walls and struggling to come out. Seeing this scene, Maulana Sahib was scared, and tears came to his eyes that he started mentioning Allah loudly. The people present there were giving Maulana Sahib information about the life of the Hafiz Quran girl. The body was lying in the cemetery. The next moment, Maulana Sahib said, "Take this girl's body to the mosque." People were whispering, wondering what the matter was. What sin did this girl commit that Allah sent this punishment? The body was transferred to the mosque, and along with it, a large crowd also came to the mosque. People were talking about various things. Everyone present there was telling their own story. One said, "We considered her very pious. Despite being a Hafiz Quran, she used to teach boys in her house. That is why Allah sent this punishment." Another said, "This girl used to teach underage boys, aged 5 to 12 years, and this happened to her." As soon as Maulana Sahib entered the mosque, there was complete silence. People were standing. The body was handed over to a wise woman, and it was said that the entire body of this girl should be examined to see what sin she used to commit that caused this to happen to her. People started wondering whether the girl's body would even be buried in the grave or not. It seemed that she was a great sinner. Maulana Sahib said, "Be quiet. In the presence of Allah, only He knows who has what status and who is how much of a sinner." Upon hearing this, everyone fell silent. But in their hearts, everyone was wondering how scorpions and snakes could come out of the grave of a Hafiz Quran girl. Maulana Sahib called everyone and said, "Call all the children who used to come to this girl to learn the Quran. I want to ask them something." Then all the children were present in the mosque. Maulana Sahib stepped forward and lovingly asked the children, "Did your Hafiz's sister ever raise her hand on you or show strictness?" Hearing this, the children fell silent and then said, "No, there is nothing like that. She was a very good girl. We learned the first letter of the Quran from her. She never showed strictness to any child and never hit any child." All the children agreed. The children also seemed satisfied on their faces. Maulana Sahib asked, "Is there anyone else in this girl's house?" Two men came forward and said, "Maulana Sahib, there is no one else in her house except her. Her parents have passed away. She lived alone. Who knows what sin she committed in solitude that Allah sent this punishment in the form of snakes and scorpions in her grave." Maulana Sahib was distressed. The girl was such that not a single stain was seen on her character. Everyone respected her and did not tire of praising her. But now, after her death, they were slandering her. Maulana Sahib quietly went to his room and offered 2 rockets of prayer. After the prayer, he raised both hands for prayer, saying, "O Allah, the owner of the whole universe." Maulana Sahib cried so much before Allah that his blessed face was drenched with tears. His beard was also soaked. Then he asked, "O my Lord, until today, I have made every decision knowing your presence. Help me today too. What sin did this girl commit that the earth is not ready to accept her?" Crying, his condition became worse. He kept thinking about the matter repeatedly. She lived alone in her house. She used to teach religious education to girls and boys all day long. Maulana Sahib was in deep trouble. Some children also said, "Our teacher used to pray 5 times a day, and never wasted any time. How could such a pious girl have snakes and scorpions in her grave? This was an unusual incident. Maulana Sahib had never seen such a thing in his life. There was something behind this matter that her friend knew. Therefore, Maulana Sahib immediately sent 2 men to the other village and said, "Bring her friend." Then the same wise woman came to whom the body of the Hafiz Quran girl had been entrusted. She was a little worried. Outside the mosque, she met Maulana Sahib. When Maulana Sahib saw her, he frowned and asked, "Tell me, what have you found in your examination of this girl's body? Did you find anything?" She said, "Maulana Sahib, this girl was very pious and pure-hearted. I did not find even the slightest suspicion in her character." Hearing this, Maulana Sahib fell silent, that if this girl was pure-hearted and had not committed any sin, then what was the reason for all this happening? The truth could only be known when her friend arrived here. She was the only one who could speak the truth with her own mouth. There were many questions that were raised. Then someone said that this girl lived alone, so surely she must have called a boy at night and committed adultery with him. That is why this punishment has come upon her. Everyone present there was questioning her character. Surely this girl must have committed adultery. She would appear virtuous in the daylight and drown in sins at night. 2 days had passed, but the man had not yet been able to bring this girl's friend. There was a strange atmosphere of confusion. Then suddenly a voice came that this girl's friend had been found. Maulana Sahib, who was feeling tired, took a deep breath and sat quietly. Upon hearing this news, he immediately got up and moved forward with quick steps. The girl was present in front of him. She was completely covered and wearing a burqa, and she looked very young. The girl started crying upon seeing Maulana Sahib and said, Maulana Sahib looked at her and immediately said, "You know why we have called you here? Many rumors have spread about this girl throughout the village. People are asking many questions about her and saying that she has reached this state because of her sins. Snakes and scorpions have appeared in her grave. Even the gravedigger tried several times to remove the snake from the grave. At first, her friend started crying, and tears came to her eyes. Then she said she was not a sinner. She did not commit adultery. But she did commit a sin, a very big sin, because of which I distanced myself from her and broke all ties. Because I knew that if I stayed here, I would have to contact her again. But maintaining contact with a girl like her was not easy for me because my parents were dearer to me than my own life." Maulana Sahib listened to her words and then asked her to start telling what sin this girl had committed that led to all this happening to her. The girl remained silent for a while and then said, "Maulana Sahib, I lived in the neighborhood of this girl. We both memorized the Quran together. But because her father had already passed away, the entire responsibility of the house was on her. Due to the poor condition of the house, she started teaching the Quran to children. The lives of this mother and daughter were going well. But as time passed, the mother of this Hafiz Quran girl started having fits and became severely ill. The illness and high fever affected her mind, and she became insane and remembered nothing. She behaved like a child. At first, my friend cried a lot for her mother and took great care of her. But gradually, she started hating her mother. Even when her mother called her, she would not go to her. Her mother would call her for her needs, but she would not do anything and would not listen to her. Instead, she would say, "I am doing something else. I will come later." Her mother would urinate and defecate on the bed, and it would get dirty. She would not change her mother's bed for several days. If she felt like it, she would give her mother food. Otherwise, the poor mother would remain hungry and thirsty, and she herself would be busy teaching the children. Maulana Sahib listened to all this from the girl's mouth. He became more and more angry, and his face turned red. He said, "This girl was very good to everyone. She did good deeds. She prayed 5 times a day. After every prayer, she would pray for her mother, saying, 'O Allah, take her to yourself. I am tired of serving my mother. If she dies, it will be better. She does not let me worship properly and does not give me time to teach the children. She creates obstacles in teaching the children, which makes me have to perform ghusl repeatedly.'" One day, I was present there when her mother was asking her for water. The poor mother was calling her repeatedly for water, but she did not listen. I went and gave her water myself. Her mother started crying in front of me, and tears were in her eyes. She was crying and complaining about her daughter to me. But when my friend heard this, she came and slapped her mother hard and started cursing her, saying, "I have ruined my life for you. What have I not done for you? I spent all my earnings on your treatment. Yet you are talking to me and defaming me in front of people." Hearing this, I could not bear it, and I slapped my friend and left. After that, I never returned. I wanted to take her mother with me, but she did not let her mother go with me. Then my father, who was a great merchant, took me to another village. After I left, her mother passed away, and time passed. Today, it has been exactly 2 weeks since her mother's death, and today this girl also passed away. People found out that this girl was not good to her mother. She used to curse her mother. She fulfilled all the rights of Allah. But when it came to her mother, she became disobedient. She could not fulfill her duty. Her behavior with her mother was very bad. In the Quran, our Lord says to lower your wings of humility towards your parents and never say "uff" to them. But this unfortunate girl had forgotten what a great sin she had committed. Everyone present started crying, and tears came to their eyes. Unknowingly, everyone apologized to their parents and deeply regretted their bad behavior. Everyone kept crying and seeking forgiveness from Allah. They prayed for the forgiveness of this girl because they had seen the consequences of disobedience to the mother with their own eyes. Then when this girl was being lowered into the grave, a large snake was still present there, and poisonous scorpions were also sitting with their stingers raised. Maulana Sahib said, "Now this is between her and Allah. Bury her in the grave like this." Now that snake was buried with the Hafiz Quran girl. Astaghfirullah. Dear friends, always remember one thing. No matter how serious the situation becomes, never disrespect your mother. Disobedience to parents can never bring happiness in this world or the hereafter. Rather, it becomes a sign of warning. Disobedience to parents always brings disgrace. Neither the grave can bear it, nor can the fire of hell. And their children can never be obedient to them. We pray to Allah to make us obedient to our parents and grant us the ability to serve them. If we make any mistakes or shortcomings, may Allah forgive our mistakes and shortcomings for the sake of His beloved. Dear friends, if you like this video, please make sure to like it and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for staying with me till the end of the video.